We saw the housing market in 2025 as a year of adjustment and settling after a pretty wild run. 2026 though, now that is shaping up to be a year of balance. It's not boring, but it's not crashing, just more normal pace. So let's get into it. Here's what I want to cover today. First, what the economists are actually predicting for 2026. Now, CREB's forecast for the year, which they always do in January of every year, that just came out recently. I attended that. ATB's forecast for the year was also included in that too. So I've merged these together to pick out really what the most important pieces are going forward and what I think everybody should be aware of if they're paying attention to the real estate market. Now, secondly, how you should be thinking about planning ahead if you're buying this year or you're selling this year. There's some things you're going to want to take out of this. And the third thing is I want to give you my own take on the market because I do see things a little bit differently on the ground than what the economists are seeing at a higher level. Hey, I'm Ryan LeBlanc. I'm a realtor here in the Calgary area, and I help families plan for their next move or investment in real estate with a focus on a lot of the practical strategies and always on smart financial decisions. At a high level, the Calgary market in 2026 is expected to be fairly balanced overall. Now, market conditions are going to vary significantly by the property type. You got condos, townhomes, your semi-detached, your detached. They are all behaving in their own way, and they're not behaving the same way. Overall, residential prices are forecasted to ease up slightly, roughly around 1% is across the board, but that is an average across the entire market. So each property type and each area definitely going to be looking a little bit different when you zoom in, and that's exactly what we're going to do here in a minute. So sales are actually expected to remain really close to the long-term averages. That's the 10-year averages that they look at. We're sitting pretty good when you're comparing long-term. But this is where the relativity bias really messes with people. Because when you've just lived through a few years of really heightened growth, everything's flying off the shelf, well, anything slower than that sometimes just feels like the market's falling apart. It's not. This is a market normalizing. It's not crashing. From an economic standpoint, Alberta is still expected to be one of the stronger performers nationally across the country in 2026. Our GDP growth is forecasted to be 2.1%. Not explosive, but healthy, right? Interest rates, well, those are expected to be relatively stable throughout the year. We just saw the Bank of Canada hold again on their overnight rate, so we're still sitting now at 2.25%, and like I said, that is expected to be pretty consistent throughout the year. Our energy prices are expected to remain a little lower in 2025, with our WTI oil sitting in the mid-60s range. That's where they're projecting at. Now, even though inflation though has eased, we've got cost of living that is still very real for a lot of households. We're all feeling it. Now that continues to influence how much of the population a lot of people are willing and able to spend on their housing. Yes, we're all feeling the pinch, but people still got to live, they still got to move, and when we've got stability on the back end of the market, when you're looking at your employment growth and your GDP numbers that are looking fairly stable, that translates to some confidence in the market for more of a long-term perspective. And that's what I'm seeing with a lot of folks too, is they're looking at more of a long-term perspective on things. Employment growth slowed significantly from what we saw in 2025. Unemployment, it remains elevated, not because jobs disappeared overnight though, but because the labor force growth has outpaced job creation. So job growth in 2026 is expected to be modest. And the takeaway here is that employment conditions should support the typical housing demand, but not growth-driven demand. Okay, that's a stipulation there. In other words, enough people buying and selling to keep the market moving, but not enough pressure that are driving prices higher across the board. Population growth between 2022 and 2024 was a huge driver of housing pressure in Calgary. That's changed. Now, migration slowed sharply in 2025. We saw that, and it is expected to slow further in 2026. That being said, there are fewer international migrants and fewer people moving here from other provinces. With that, Calgary's population is still projected to grow at 1.3% this year. So that means that demand is returning closer to the long-term norms instead of overwhelming the supply like it did for a few years ago. And at the end of the day, the supply and demand, when you have more people coming in, I mean, we saw it. That's what happens. Everybody that's coming in here, they all need a place to stay. They need a place to buy. They need a place to rent. Calgary's just was not keeping up. Now, in order to address the supply issue that we had, combating the high numbers of migration that we had, is the construction industry, who basically went gangbusters for a couple of years. This is one of the biggest factors that's going to shape 2026 market for the real estate industry. We saw record high housing starts over the past few years, but particularly in 2025, we did set some records for the number of housing starts across Canada. Right now, though, there's still over 26,000 units that are under construction. And 45% of those units, though, those are rental units, like purpose-built rentals. Now, one step further on that is the majority of the new supply that's coming online is apartment-style rentals. So of the 26,000 units, 17,771 are apartments. That's a lot of apartments coming online. And even more so, this affects the rental market significantly because 63% of those apartments are purpose-built rentals. New housing starts are expected to drop by roughly a third in 2026. That's good. We're going to slow that down a little bit, but the supply that's already in that pipeline, that's still going to hit the market. So that elevated supply continues to impact both the resale side and the rental markets. And that's putting downward pressure on rental rates. When you're competing, let's take a look at some of these rental or these vacancy rates here. We've got the Northwest sitting at 6% vacancy rate. The Northeast is 4.5%. The Southeast, we're sitting at 2.9%. The Fish Creek zone, which is the southwest corner, that's at 4.6%. And the southwest corner, they're calling it, I would call that the west side of the city, it's 3.6%. And inner city is sitting at 5.4%. When renters have more options and less urgency, fewer of them are feeling that force to jump into homeownership. And at the same time, higher supply and the softer rents, that's reducing the investors' demand to buy up apartments with that purpose of turning them into rentals for themselves. So what happens is all of that supply that would typically be bought up by investors in that market, well, that just feeds back into the homeownership pool in the general market, right? Now let's talk about condos because this is really where things are the toughest, okay? Sales, we saw the sales decline quite a bit, 28% down. That's a sharp drop in 2025. Now, we did see inventory hit record highs, so our inventory went up 51% over the course of the year. So at the end of the year, we rounded it out being at $322,167 is the benchmark price for an apartment in the city of Calgary. With that, we're also sitting at 4 months of supply. Now, when you factor in all of the inventory that's coming on from the new construction and the direction of the condo market right now, the apartment market, we're going to see further price declines in 2026, roughly around 3 to 4%. This segment carries the most downside risk simply because supply is heavy and the demand is cooled. And this is where buyers have the most leverage and sellers, I mean, you need to be most realistic if you are looking to sell. Taking a look at row homes and townhomes, now these sit somewhere in the middle. Our sales, we did see the sales decline in 2025. They're down about 17% from the previous year. Inventory numbers, we saw new records as well for new listings that came on, which brought up our inventory to 57% above where it was last year. Those numbers, that translates to a decreased price, benchmark price. Finishing out the year, your row homes and townhomes, they're pricing at a benchmark of $441,217. With that, they're sitting at 3 months of supply right now. New construction inventory still coming online as well. We do expect prices to soften a little bit more. That is expected. So we're going to see that a little bit more coming into this year. Forecasted sales volume this year now, we are looking at 3,700 sales, which, you know what, is just slightly under last year's sales. And so we've got prices are forecasted to decrease by 1.9%. Semi-detached homes make up the smallest share of an overall market activity. Now the prices here modestly increased in 2025, but conditions vary quite a bit from price point and location. We saw sales overall on their semi-detached go down by 8%. Inventory numbers were increased by 70%. So that alone tells me that there was a lot of demand for semi-detached homes, which is why they were actually able to gain in overall price points of increasing by 3% at the end of the year. So they notched out the year at 685,850, and with a 2.7 months of inventory, that's a pretty healthy, fairly balanced inventory level. In 2026, prices are expected to remain relatively stable here, with some modest price growth, just under 1%. This is definitely one of the quieter, steadier segments of the market. The detached homes, they remain the most resilient segment, as is usual in our city. Now, the sales did slow in 2025, but they did stay relatively stable. So the sales were down 9%, single-digit decrease in sales. But again, relativity, we're coming off of some very high years for the amount of sales that we've seen in the past. But long-term trends, we're looking pretty good. Inventory levels, we saw a bunch of inventory come on. So again, same with the semi-detached. When we were looking at a 9% decrease in sales and a 56% increase in inventory, I mean, a lot of people are still attracted to the detached market. And when you're looking at long-term trends, we're doing pretty solid on the detached homes. Overall, we did see the price increase in 2025 by 1%. So detached homes actually finished the year out at 752,767. So seeing the supply improve like that, it really helped to bring the conditions more to a balanced market for your detached homes. In 2026, they are expecting detached homes to remain relatively flat, very modest increase, about 0.1%. We can touch on that in a minute. I've got my own thoughts on that. Now, for buyers, this is a much healthier environment. There's more choice. You've got less urgency than what we've seen in years, and the negotiation power is coming back, especially if we're talking condos and townhomes. But overall, I mean, conditions, we're seeing the sale of buyer's home condition becoming a little bit more common now. Haven't been able to do that for a few years when everything was going crazy. So you've got more tools, more leverage, and more choice. I mean, in 2026, strategy is going to matter more than speed. Now, for sellers, pricing correctly is critical. Overpricing is going to lead to longer days on market, more price reductions, and just weaker outcomes overall. Presentation, marketing, those are really going to matter again in this balanced market that we're in. And just like the buyers, the sellers, they need to understand that the market conditions are going to vary significantly by property type or by location. So reading what you see on the news or seeing your neighbor's house or talking to your friends, that's good overall blanket information. You really want to dial down with somebody that understands the market so that you know what your specific market and how it performs, and then how you can price strategically and present your property in the best way. That's going to get you ahead. A few points to wrap it up, and my own perspective. Apartments, I think we are seeing that very clearly. They're going to get hammered a little bit more this year. There's just really no way around that. With the amount of supply that we have coming online through the new construction and just the surplus that we've got built up in the resale market already, it's going to take some serious time, maybe up to 2027. We might see some turnaround on that, where they start to maybe get a little more balanced, but there's a lot of supply coming online and it's going to take some time. 2026, if you're in that market, it's just going to be a strategy driven market and not a momentum market. But the positive news is, there are opportunities for both buyers and the sellers, but only with the proper kind of planning. And we're seeing it already. There seems to be a lot of activity happening right now. The springtime is coming a little bit early. We've been treated with some really nice weather this year, and I think that maybe that has something to do with it. But the areas that I spent a lot of time in, I'm seeing it happening. I'm seeing properties moving and lots of activities, and I'm getting phone calls, and all of this is telling me that this spring is probably going to outperform what this CREB forecast is saying. I mean, this week alone, I've actually had 3 showings that were canceled with some buyers of mine because the properties that we were going to see, they sold with multiple offers before my clients could even get in to see them. Now, I'm not talking about some crazy bidding wars or the prices being bid way up, but it really does demonstrate that there is some very serious buyer activity out there right now. And when the property is presented well and it's priced right, the demand is there. Your detached and your semi-detached are still going to do very well this year. Fairly balanced. I mean, very much a balanced market, but I do think we're going to get a couple of points. 2 to 3 percentage points is my prediction for this year overall. I'm seeing a lot of demand from buyers that I am working with, and it is still the most desired segment of the market. Moving over to row homes, steady but softer. Simply put, they're going to hold steady throughout 2026. We won't see too much change on that. Remember, local data and personalized advice is always going to beat your national news stories. If you want to talk through how this forecast applies to your specific situation, whether you're buying, you're selling, or you're just trying to plan ahead and see what makes sense, I'm always happy to help. Real estate decisions, they work best when they're made with clarity. So let's have the conversation. And hey, if you've got any questions or there's a topic that you'd like me to cover on another video, drop it in the comments below or reach out directly. Thanks for watching.